know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gale Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk gives my revisionist history of New Mexico Territory's Lincoln County War battle. Talks 12 to 17 cover the Lincoln County War. The information is from my book, The Santa Fe Ring versus Billy the Kid, The Making of an American Monster. The Lincoln County War is brought to life in my docufiction novel, Billy and Paulita. The lost Lincoln County War battle is one of the great tragedies in the history of American democracy. It was a tragedy made inevitable by unchecked greed of Santa Fe Ring organized crime. It was a tragedy made inevitable by Lincoln County's Anglo and Hispanic freedom fighters' refusal to yield to tyranny. Its triumph of evil, murder, and treason is a tragedy. Its being unsung to the present is a tragedy. Ring boss Thomas Benton Catron and his minions took horrific revenge on citizens for their defiance during the Lincoln County War. It was in the final battle from July 14th to 19th of 1878. By then, the Ring had assassinated John Tunstall, issued an illegal proclamation shielding his killers, killed regulator leader Frank McNabb, tried repeatedly to murder Alexander McSween, and massacred at San Patricio. Now it sought extermination, using troops and weapons of war against civilians. The six-day Lincoln County War battle began with naive hope in 1 mile long, one street, Lincoln Town, on Sunday, July 14th, 1878. Its leader, Attorney Alexander McSween, was a pious idealist, personifying grassroots Americans' confidence in law and government to yield justice. Though he'd lived through grim proof to the contrary, McSween rode optimistically into Lincoln that Sunday. He'd left the safe haven of Cattle King John Chisholm's South Spring River Ranch. He believed that confronting the Ring at its Lincoln stronghold would end in peace and in his prevailing. Most townspeople had fled. There must have been an eerie silence that Sunday when McSween and his 60 primarily Hispanic men from San Patricio and Picacho rode into Lincoln. With them were regulators, including new leader Hosea Doc Scurlock and 18-year-old Billy Bonney, all called themselves McSweens. McSween's confidence in peace had stifled alarm. So in his double-winged adobe house next door to murdered John Tunstall's store remained his wife Susan, her sister Elizabeth Shield, and Elizabeth's 5 young children. Elizabeth's husband, Attorney David Shield, was away, not anticipating danger, and Shield's intern, Harvey Morris, was there. The McSween and Shield law practice was conducted from the house. Still in Lincoln that day were also Ringite Sheriff George Pepin, his deputies Billy Matthews and Jack Long, and Ring's sub-boss James Dolan. Dolan's partner, John Riley from his Lincoln mercantile business, J.J. Dolan and Company, was in Santa Fe strategizing with his actual employer for cattle acquisitions, ring boss, U.S. Attorney T.B. Catron. They wanted to evade the Posse Comitatus Act, barring military intervention. Remaining in town was also stubborn John Squire Wilson, ignoring being illegally removed from his Justice of the Peace office that March 9th by Ringite Governor Samuel Beach Axtell. In martyred Tunstall's private apartment in his store remained Dr. Taylor Ely, who had taken part in Tunstall's gruesome autopsy, and Ely's wife and 2 children. Across the street, in the house of McSween-side Jose Montano, his wife and children remained. At the east end of town, McSween-side's Isaac Ellis and his family were at home. And to the east of Tunstall's store stayed Ringite Saturnina Baca in a house rented from McSween with his wife and many children, poised to be a traitor to his people. Heading to Lincoln was an outlaw horde of about 60, Seven Rivers, Rustler ranchers, and Messiah's outlaw, John Kinney, and his gang, to become Sheriff Pepin's so-called posse. On that first day of the battle, that McSween believed would be bloodless, his men took strategic positions along Lincoln's single street to hold the town. They occupied Tunstall's store, the houses of Jose Montano, Juan Patron, and Isaac Ellis. Strategically useless at the western end of town were the Ring's house and hangout, the Wortley Hotel. McSween's more realistic men provisioned his house, including a keg of gunpowder for reloading ammunition, but McSween only permitted Regulator Jim Frenchy French into his house as a guard. But when shooting Seven Rivers and Kinney men arrived that day, McSween accepted additional men from the Montano house. They were Billy Bonney, Eugenio Salazar, and Tom O'Folliard. They were from San Patricio, Jose Chavez y Chavez, Francisco Zamora, and Vicente Romero. They were from Picacho, Ignacio Gonzalez, and Florencio Chavez. Lincoln's terrain was ideal for defense. To the south were nearby sparsely vegetated high foothills, which would leave assailants exposed to McSween's gunfire. To the north, behind McSween's house, was the Bonito River, blocking adversaries. Much pointed to victory. By the battle's second day, in McSween's house, his men had blockaded windows and cut defensive portholes in his adobe brick walls. McSween, with usual legality, sent by messenger an eviction letter to his tenant, Saturnina Baca. Its grounds were that Baca was aiding men threatening his life. Baca was provisioning Sheriff George Pepin's men, occupying an old stone tower in the middle of town. Baca, the Ring stooge, got that letter to local ring boss James Dolan at the house to fake that McSween threatened his wife and children. It was their prearranged excuse to circumvent the Posse Comitatus Act to get troops from Fort Stanton. But that second day's only aggression was Deputy Jack Long's attempt to serve Catherine's agent David Easton's invalid warrants on McSween and the kid. Easton wrote them after the Lincoln County War's April 30th skirmish. Regulators had responded in self-defense to ring-eyed Seven Rivers rustlers who came to Lincoln to kill McSween. But Easton's warrants were invalid because he immediately quit as Justice of the Peace. Deputy Long retreated at warning shots. No warrants were served. McSween apparently stayed confident of victory. Day 3 of the battle proved that McSween's held the town. Commander Nathan Augustus Monroe Dudley, already twice court-martialed, hesitated to violate the Posse Comitatus Act. So ring-eyed Sheriff George Pepin floated the ring's usual outlaw myth. He wrote to Dudley, "Sir, if you could loan me a howitzer, I am sure that parties for whom I have warrants would surrender. We are being attacked by a lawless mob." Dudley took a tentative step. He sent to Lincoln 9th Cavalry Private Barry Robinson for so-called fact-finding. A staged shot at Robertson, likely from the house, caused his horse to throw him. Uninjured and remounted, he returned to the fort. But Alexander McSween was now set up for another malicious prosecution, attempted murder of a soldier. Day 4 of the battle had some action by Dudley. By Fort Stanton's telegraph, he was likely being instructed by T.B. Catron on evading the Posse Comitatus Act. The Private Barry Robinson attack provided ammunition, so Dudley sent Fort Stanton's ring-eyed post surgeon Daniel Appel to Lincoln. Married to ring-eyed Indian agent Frederick Godfroy's daughter, Appel had written a fraudulent autopsy report on Tunstall, claiming he was insane from venereal disease, and attacked Sheriff Brady's possemen, who killed him in self-defense. With Appel went ring-eyed Captain George Purrington and 5 soldiers. It was called fact-finding. They questioned McSween about the Private Robinson shooting. They ignored his denial. And Sheriff Pepin used the ceasefire of troops' presence to get his men on the South foothills. That day had first casualties. From the Montano house, Fernando Herrera, Regulator Charlie Bowdry's brother-in-law, fatally shot with his Sharps Big 50 Buffalo rifle, Seven Rivers posseman Charlie Crawford, 915 yards away on those foothills. And Ben Ellis, son of McSween-side Isaac Ellis, was wounded by Pepin's men shooting from the foothills. After that, carnage was solely by the ring. By day 5 of the battle, since the South foothills were little advantage for the ringites, McSween anticipated a near bloodless victory. And charismatic Billy Bonney inspired all in McSween's house. Susan McSween later described him as lively. The ringites, too, recognized that McSween's victory was nigh. So local boss James Dolan and outlaw posseman John Kinney paid Commander Dudley a visit at Fort Stanton. His saying no was not an option. On day 6 of the battle, Friday, July 19th, 1878, Commander N.A.M. Dudley marched on Lincoln. He was violating the June 18th Posse Comitatus Act by intervening as a partisan in a civilian conflict. He was endangering women and children in the McSween, Ely, and Montano houses. With terrorist intent, he brought into the tiny town 39 soldiers, a Gatling machine gun, and a howitzer cannon, all sufficient to level it and kill everyone. T.B. Catron's apologist biographer Victor Westphal, in his 1973 book, Thomas Benton Catron and His Era, inadvertently confirmed Catron's role in Dudley's intervention. As U.S. Attorney, Catron set the stage during the Lincoln County War by using the outlaw myth to inform District Commander Edward Hatch about troops being needed in Lincoln County. Hatch informed Army headquarters at Fort Leavenworth. Westphal also confirmed that Dudley was beholden to Catron for legally defending him in his court-martials of 1871 and 1877. Dudley personally threatened Alexander McSween with annihilation if any soldier was fired upon. He left 3 soldiers on McSween's property to inhibit shooting and enable besiegement. Furthermore, Dudley placed 3 soldiers with Sheriff Pepin as guards. Dudley then panicked upon learning that David Easton's arrest warrants were invalid, so he coerced Justice of the Peace Wilson by death threat to write false arrest warrants for McSween and the Kid, using the Private Robinson shooting as an excuse. Dudley next pointed his howitzer cannon at Jose Montano's house and began its loading drill. Terrified McSweens fled from there, precipitating mass flight of their comrades in the town. Only those trapped in McSween's house remained. Dudley then berated Pepin for not capturing or killing the escapees. After setting up camp, Dudley, likely drunk, with mocking obscenities, refused Susan McSween's plea for protection. He then enabled the arson of the McSween's house in an attempt to incinerate those inside. But he let Susan McSween and her sister and children depart. At 9 p.m., the house's inmates tried escape. The raging fire, with added exploding gunpowder keg, had left them trapped in the East Wing's north kitchen. In anticipation, Dudley embedded 3 of his officers at the next-door Tunstall building with Pepin's shooting outlaw posse men. Dudley's mission was death to all. While escaping, Billy saw the 3 soldiers fire at least 1 volley in unison at him and escaping others. He saw Harvey Morris shot dead. The soldiers might have been the murderers. Murdered also were Francisco Zamora and Vicente Romero. McSween was murdered by Pepin's possemen, just as Seven Rivers rustler Robert Beckwith tried to serve him with a coerced Wilson warrant. Beckwith was killed in the friendly fire. Escaping Eugenio Salazar was left with 2 bullets in his back for life. McSween's house was destroyed. The Lincoln County War battle was lost by treachery. The war was over. Never again in New Mexico would people dare to rise up against the organized criminality of the monstrous Santa Fe Ring. So the ring never ceased to exist or to control. On July 20th, the day after the Lincoln County War battle, Alexander McSween's corpse was found in his rear yard with its eyeballs eaten by his starving chickens. At the adjoining Tunstall store property, Sheriff Pepin's outlaw posse men with soldiers' enabling presence looted Tunstall's store. By the next year, Billy's witnessing Dudley's using soldiers to kill civilians would yield his testimony against him in the Fort Stanton Military Court of Inquiry. The immediate response to the lost Lincoln County War was flight from the territory by most of the regulators and frightened silence in Lincoln County. The Lincoln County War was the Ring's greatest triumph, not only by crushing mercantile, banking, and ranching competition, not only by exterminating opposition, but by using the outlaw myth to hide it as a freedom fight. It would also be the Ring's historical undoing by its creation of larger-than-life outlaw, Billy the Kid, guaranteeing that the Lincoln County War would not be forgotten. And there was a final surge for freedom. Susan McSween, Alexander's widow, like Colfax County's Mary McPherson before her, refused to bow to Ring terrorism. The day after the battle, she risked her life to return to Lincoln. She even tried to stop Pepin's outlaw posse men from looting Tunstall's store. And she was determined to prosecute Commander Dudley for the murder of her husband and arson of her home. Hope for justice now rested with the reports by investigator for the Departments of Justice and the Interior, Frank Warner Angel. He'd been in New Mexico territory during much of the Lincoln County War. He knew the truth. The Lincoln County War's aftermath and the Frank Warner Angel reports are in a talk of their own.